Hey everyone, MeltingMan254 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Today we'll be looking at a fancy speedster known as Jackrabbit, an anthropomorphic rabbit who carries around a big laser blaster. The character was designed by Cliff Bleszinski and was developed by Epic Mega Games, now going by the name of Epic Games, and became the mascot to the company back then. So let's start off with its first game, simply known as Jackrabbit. That was released for the MS-DOS, Windows, and Macintosh around July 30th, 1994. The story is more of a science fiction fantasy take on the tortoise and the hare story, as the story for this game is about rabbits and tortoises who have been at war at each other for over 3,000 years. An evil mastermind named Devon Shell has invaded the planet Caritas and kidnaps the princess Eva Earlong, and it's up to Jazz along with his LFG-2000 to journey forth to defeat Devon and rescue Eva Earlong. The game is divided into 6 episodes, as each of them contain 3 planets, as every planet contains 2 levels. There are also secret and bonus levels that Jazz can enter, which he turns into another species of animals for the secret levels. Gameplay-wise, it's running and gunning platformer, and borrows several elements from Sonic the Hedgehog, such as the ability to speed through levels, springs, and the end goals. Some people think that Jackrabbit is a bit of a lame copy of Sonic the Hedgehog in a computer world, and I find that a little bit interesting. In my Cancel Sonic the Hedgehog games episode, I mentioned how they had plans of porting the first Sonic game to the Amiga and other old computer consoles. So, was there an interesting coincidence? Probably not. Jackrabbit was actually more inspired by another platformer game called Zool, and surprisingly enough, the character Zool makes a cameo in the Jackrabbit game. Maybe I'll talk more about Zool in the future of Forgotten Media. Jazz has his own unique moves, such as using his gun and getting power-ups, using his helicopter ears, and a few others. As for the items, some of them represent power-ups like upgrading your gun, speed boost, carrots to regain your health, and extra lives. The game utilizes a game engine called Open Jazz that was created by Alistair Thompson, if I pronounced that right, and the game utilizes 2 level editors. When Jackrabbit was first released, it received a lot of positive reviews, even though it didn't get much popularity to become a mascot of the PC consoles during the time. But it did create a decent amount of fans who liked the game, since there weren't that many good PC platformer games during the time. In 1995, Jackrabbit was declared Arcade Game of the Year, and received several versions. There's the original version, there's a shareware version, a Christmas version, a Macintosh version, a CD-ROM version with an Easter egg inside, an update to the Christmas version called Holiday Hare, a shareware version of Holiday Hare, and a CD-ROM version for the Windows 95. During the same year the game was released, several characters from the game such as Jazz, Eva, and Devon appear as unlockable characters in One Must Fall 2097. So anyway, the first Jazz game was pretty good during its time. Next up is its sequel, Jackrabbit 2, that was made for Microsoft Windows and Macintosh OS and was released somewhere in 1998. The story takes place after the first game, as Jazz has been knighted by the king and queen for rescuing their daughter, Eva Earlong, and is able to marry her. During the wedding, Devon crashes into the party with his army and steals Eva's 12-carat diamond ring. Humiliated for not defeating him, Jazz is thrown into the dungeon, but manages to escape with the help of his brother, Spaz Jackrabbit. So the 2 rabbits head out to get the ring back and defeat Devon once again. The gameplay is like its predecessor with a few new things such as new enemies, new bosses, new power-ups, and so on. The cutscenes have been improved compared to its original, as the sequel is giving it more texture and detail, making it look better. The levels are usually race to the finish levels, and some of them have puzzle elements, and some of them are secret levels. There are a couple of pickups such as coins, gems, and fruit. If you get enough fruit, that'll activate Sugar Rush, making you invincible for a brief period of time. Jazz has his usual moves, while Spaz has his own moves. He can do a double jump and use the side kick, which is some fancy kicking ability. This is also the first Jazz game to feature a multiplayer feature, which is pretty interesting. When the game was released, it did very well for its time and got a couple of add-ons and upgrades. There's the Shareware Edition, there's Holiday Hare 98, which was a Christmas edition, there's the Secret Files, which introduces a new character named Lori Jackrabbit. She's Jazz's sister and was originally going to be Spaz's girlfriend, but the role was changed and has her own set of moves. We also made a shareware version of the Secret Files, and one more Christmas special called The Christmas Chronicles, which also features Lori. So yeah, the sequel was pretty good. During the times when the games were being released, they released a few comics that advertised for both games, as they are pretty interesting to look at, as they would usually make a comic to certain video games for advertisements, just like what the Archie Sonic comics are doing recently. There's this funny moment where Sonic makes a cameo in the first comic demanding his lawyers. It seems like they were poking fun at this bit, as Jazz is similar to Sonic in a few ways. At least with Jazz, it makes sense because rabbits are fast and hedgehogs aren't that fast. Next up is an unreleased PC second sequel called Jazz Jackrabbit 3, sometimes known as Jazz Jackrabbit 3D. The story is that Eva and Jazz have settled down and have some kids now that Devin's out of the way, but their peaceful family is disturbed as Devin returns and kidnaps the children using a dimensional time machine to take them into a 3D alternate universe. So Jazz jumps into the 3D realm of gaming and goes off to save his kids. The game was going to be more of a third-person shooter with some platforming and adventuring elements, as well as some multiplayer action. The items and enemies are all made up of dreams, as Devin uses the kids' dreams to go after Jazz. No idea how that's gonna work. Spaz and Lori were also planned to be playable characters, which they could mean that they were going to have their own levels, or just be characters that the character select option. When the game was in production, Epic Games was unable to find a publisher to get the game going, and sadly, the game was cancelled in May of 2000 and was never seen again. It's a bit of a shame. It looked kinda cool. For a while, it would seem like Jazz Jackrabbit would become a forgotten character, until they decided to make one more game, Jazz Jackrabbit Advance, that was released for the Game Boy Advance somewhere in 2002. I actually wasn't going to feature this on Forgotten Media, but I decided to throw this one in as a bonus. At first, I thought this was somewhat of a remake/reboot, but it states that it continues the story from Jazz 2, as it shows Jazz on his final mission before retiring, as he visits a planet full of evil chameleons and its evil king, and manages to defeat them. His boss later tells him that a new evil named Dark Shell is going around causing damage, and so Jazz goes off to defeat the Dark Shell and save the galaxy. The gameplay is more of a toss-up between the two games from the past. Levels tend to be a bit shorter but offer some variations and puzzles, as there are 24 levels in total. It contains its supply of weapons and items, but the levels aren't stuffed with them like the other two. You can also collect wads of cash called space credits, which act as money to buy items and such. The game also features 11 multiplayer levels, as the levels were unlocked by playing certain single-player levels. When the game was released, it got more of a mixed reaction. Fans of the Jazz series were outraged with Jazz's new look, and that none of the familiar characters such as Eva, Lori, or Devin appear in the game. They even started a campaign called Fixers to Jackrabbit to make the company change Jazz back to normal, but obviously that didn't work. Also, the game isn't canon to the series, as this game wasn't made by Epic Games. Instead, it was made by a company called Jalico Entertainment, if I pronounced that right. Epic Games licensed the game, but had nothing to do with it. I see Jazz Jackrabbit Advance very similar to the Mario and Zelda CDI games, as they were made by a totally different company, and the original company licensed the game, but had nothing to do with it. So after Jazz's sore comeback, people just started forgetting about him and just vanished from existence and was never seen again. Nowadays, the Jazz games are either easy to find or hard to find, depending on how rare or in good condition they are, while most of the special editions are very rare to find. In closing, Jazz Jackrabbit was a fun and interesting game series that should have lasted a bit longer. It would be nice if they could actually make a more proper second sequel, giving Jazz the respect he deserves and a new generation of fans. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.